Hey folks! So in this video I'm going to be covering what a consul is, what each type can do, and just a few ideas on how and when you might want to include them in your Horus Heresy army. This is also a tier list, but don't run away, it's got a difference to it. I'll be ranking them on 3 criteria: narrative potential, hobby potential, and gaming potential, with the idea of giving you a rounded perspective on which you want to include in your army. All that in about 15 minutes or so. So, here we go! Okay, so, first things first. What even is a consul? If you're here, you're interested in playing Heresy, or perhaps you're just curious about the setting, and you see and hear people on the interwebs talking about consuls and casually throwing around references to their totally sick converted Esoterist or absolute death dealer of a Moritat. Now, you might ask yourself, are they having a stroke, collective hallucination perhaps, or are they trying to get you to join some kind of cult? I mean, it's really hard to tell. A quick aside, if they ask you to join a warrior lodge, just say no. Okay, back on track with the video. So, what they are in fact talking about are HQ choices for the Legiones Astartes army in Heresy, aka the 30k version of the power armoured space bros you've come to know and love in 40k, the Space Marines. Okay, so in the Heresy verse, there are 2 types of officers in a Space Marine Legion you need to know about at the moment: line officers and Legion officers. Now, line officers usually command at most a single company, and often smaller units which form part of or are attached to a company. Junior and senior centurions are the most common ranks. Now, Legion officers, meanwhile, make up a legion's high command. They run the show and consist of praetors, who command formations larger than a company, and the Legiones Consulares, or consuls. The consuls are senior centurions who, by dint of their particular skill and experience in a particular facet of war, are rewarded with a more senior rank and who carry out specialised roles and tasks on the battlefield for the Legion. So, in short, a consul is a specialist senior centurion. Now, a brief word on rankings. I'm going to give each consul a ranking out of 3, with 3 being the highest, and for each of the 3 categories. Now, the 3 categories I'm going to use are narrative potential. What does the consul bring to the story of your game and your army? Hobby potential. What converting and painting opportunities does the model present? And lastly, gaming potential. How useful and effective is that model going to be on the tabletop in your army? I'll then add these up and add them to our league table of consuls. Now, I'm going to cover the consuls in the Loyalist and the Traitor books only, and not any Legion specific consuls, and there are a few. Perhaps I'll do those in another video. This one's already going to be, getting pretty long. We've got 16 to cover. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to check out some of my other Horus Heresy videos and drop me a like, comment, and subscribe. Okay, right, in no particular order, off we go. First up, the Moritat. This is the guy who, when I didn't play Heresy, I couldn't even guess who he was, what he did. There's no clue in the name at all. So, the Moritat is a killer, pure and simple. Moritats operate outside of the usual Legion command structure and are assigned the dirty, underhand missions that need doing, but where High Command doesn't want to get their hands dirty. They are outcasts, feared, shunned by others in the Legion, and wield some of the Legion's most restricted and powerful weapons. That includes rad weapons and disintegrator weapons. Disintegrator weapons are terrifying weapons from the unification wars of old Earth, which disrupt their target at a molecular level, literally tearing it apart. Moritats specialise in close combat gunfighting with twin pistols. Some speculate that they're a result perhaps of gene seed mutations or impurities in the Legion. Perhaps these are deliberate, perhaps they're not. In my opinion, the Moritat oozes narrative potential, and their ability to lead destroyer squads, which no other console can do, support this. Destroyers arguably get some of the most interesting toys, including rad weapons and graviton guns, so I think the Moritat is a strong choice for a destroyer-themed army. Now, in game terms, their twin disintegrator pistols, jump pack, and chain fire rule means that they can throw out a fearsome close-range barrage, albeit with the risk, if they're wielding the disintegrator pistol, which is a get-hots weapon, that they might inflict damage on themselves. Now, in hobby terms, the opportunities for modelling a rootin', tootin', two-gun wielding Space Marine jumping through the air just can't be beat, and I invite you to give it a go. I'm going to give the Moritat 2 for narrative, 2 for hobby, and a 3 for gaming potential. Okay, second up, the Delegatus. The Delegatus is a consul who has had delegated authority from a more senior Legion officer, perhaps even the Primarch. They wield the authority of the officer in completing their specific mission. Now, in more common military parlance, they're operating on what would be known as detached duty or independent command. In game terms, this allows you to take a right of war in armies under 1,000 points, and they have a special order which allows them to rally legionaries in the army once per turn to keep them in the fight longer, sorry, once per game. The main issue for the Delegatus is to either give you access to a right of war in a small game, or if you're fielding an army made up of more than one detachment, you can use a second legion and right of war in one force. Now, this is great for those who can't just choose one legion to collect, or who want to create some soupy goodness. This is a good option as well ahead of specific rules for shattered legions for representing mixed forces, such as those depicted on Isstvan 3 in the Black Library books, made up of your choice in that case of the Sons of Horus, Emperor's Children, Death Guard, and or World Eaters. Now, personally, I'm really tempted by this one because I have a Sons of Horus army and I love all of those additional legions, so it's going to be hard to resist. I'm going to give the Delegatus a solid 3 for narrative potential as he opens lots of doors, a 1 for hobby potential as there's not much to get your teeth into here except possibly a fancy hat, and 2 for gaming potential as again he opens up doors, but beyond that he's perhaps nothing super special. Next, the Herald. The Herald is what in Warhammer Fantasy Battle would have been termed the Army Battle Standard Bearer. He carries the Legion's standard. The standard embodies the courage and the honour of the Legion, can't be allowed to fall to the enemy. The standard buffs the leadership of nearby troops to 10 for morale and pinning purposes, and gives any unit the bearer joins the line keyword. Now, this allows the unit to capture objectives, so for example could be used to turn a unit of Terminators, who are not usually line, they're usually heavy, into objective holding line troops. That's pretty handy. The Herald is also fearless and causes fear 1, so he's quite useful for controlling my morale dynamics on the game table and potentially comboing with some other things. In modelling terms, the Herald is a fantastic opportunity, I think, to kitbash a really cool custom standard, paint a beautiful freehand banner. You know, the Herald gets a 2 for narrative for me, a 3 for hobby because there's so much potential, and 2 from a gaming standpoint. Now, next up is the Champion. He's relatively self-explanatory. He represents one of your Legion's best warriors and is extremely skilled in facing enemy characters in one-on-one close combat. He receives a Paragon Blade, a very effective close combat weapon that increases his weapon skill from 5 through to 6. That makes him the equal of a Praetor, and the Paragon Blade also means he's capable of inflicting instant death, so he's very handy. This is a good boost that will make a sizable difference to the arithmetic of combats. However, champions can never back down from a challenge and must always declare a challenge if they have the chance. This can be a problem, but at least the units he's with does gain a fearless boost while he's doing that. Now, the champion perhaps seems a bit dull compared to the consoles on offer, but what he does well, and actually, in my opinion, one of the best reasons to take him is a narrative and hobby reason. The challenge rules mean that any game with a champion will be fun of full, nail-biting duels to the death. In my opinion, it would be lots of fun to progressively add kill markings, trophies to your champion to reflect their in-game performance and mark all of their victories over enemy characters. I'm going to give the champion therefore a 3 for narrative, 2 for hobby, and a 2 for gaming potential. Okay, the Legion Chaplain. Now, you may remember the Chaplain from such films as 40k, and to be honest, not much has really changed. Chaplains represent a cadre of indoctrination officers. They're similar to the political officers used in Soviet World War II armies that you may have seen in movies. Now, tasked with maintaining ideological purity in the legions, that is their main role. Later, after the heresy, they would be responsible for strengthening belief in the Emperor's godhood and preaching the faith. Chaplains buff the unit they join with the stubborn and hatred rules, giving them a morale and combat boost, and receive a mastercrafted power weapon, the Crozius Arcanum, which is their badge of office. Chaplain is an uncomplicated and fun choice, but lacking in a lot of subtlety. He can take Terminator armor, so pairing him with an extremely aggressive, high weapon skill, high strength and AP close combat unit, like Terminators or Legion specific Terminators or Assault units, feels like the way to go. I'm going to give the Chaplain a 1 for narrative, because he's a bit dull really. Although I concede he's a good and fluffy choice perhaps for a Word Bearer's army. A 1 for hobby, as his look is quite defined, and a 3 for gaming potential. Okay, on to the Master of Signals. The Master of Signals is a strategy and communications expert who can make better use of reserves. Now, I really love the inclusion of this option in Heresy. It feels like one of those instances where 30k is trying to be more realistic about how it portrays combat on the tabletop. It's drawing an analogy to modern, JTACs and I-Star units, rather than just giving us another beat stick with a huge sword. His strategic comms ability allows you to reroll failed reserve rolls and to lend his leadership of 9 to another unit for a morale or pinning test once per turn. He also receives some pretty cool kit, including the Cognus Signum, which buffs a nearby shooting attack with another ballistic skill, and the Vox Disruptor, which gives your opponent a minus to their reserve rolls. So overall, he's an interesting and powerful option in the right context. He pairs well with a heavy support unit and an army that depends on reserves, such as the Sons of Horus army with the Long March Rite of War, is going to benefit. It's also undeniably fun to cover your Space Marines in lots of antennas, radar dishes, give him his own little Pip-Boy thing, whatever, so that's a great conversion opportunity. I'm going to give the Master of Signals a 2 for narrative, a 3 for hobby, and a 2 for gaming potential. Okay, the Primus Medicae. The Primus Medicae has 2 functions within the Legion. He is responsible for the well-being and the health of his brothers, both before and after and during battle, and he tends to their wounds. He is also entrusted with retrieving gene seed from his fallen brothers in battle and ensuring that its purity is maintained. Now, Medicaes actually hold what actually turns out to be quite a surprising level of authority in executing their duty. So for example, in the Flight of the Eisenstein Black Library novel, we see Captain Garrow is removed from the combat drop at Isfahan 3 by the orders of his own company Medicae, whom he actually outranks. He then has to go to Typhon, the first captain of the Death Guard, to attempt to overrule this decision. In-game, the Primus Medicae is extremely useful, will help keep your troops on the table longer, making it highly likely you will want to include one somewhere in your force. Now, personally, I plan to include one probably in a large unit of Reavers to help boost their survivability, as they're only toughness 4 and a 3+ save. Now, he does have the option, he has lots of great options for conversions, and you can potentially show him tending to wounded colleagues, carrying them. Just make sure to keep it tasteful. I'm going to give the Medicae a 1 for narrative, a 2 for hobby, and 3 for gaming potential. Okay, on to the Vigilator. The Vigilator is essentially the Legion's chief marksman, tasked with missions of assassination, disruption, and observation. Think Jude Law from Enemy at the Gates, but like a lot less pretty. His brace of special rules improves his effectiveness with a Nemesis Bolter, adding Rending 2+ and Shell Shock 1, and means he can reroll 1s to wound against designated units. With a Mastercrafted Nemesis Bolter, he will virtually never miss at a stonking 72-inch range. The Vigilator is likely to be most useful picking off leaders and special weapons. Now, you should pair him with a Rotor Cannon, Rapier Battery, or other pinning weapon for some fun pinning action. This is not a unit which massively appeals to me, to be honest, and would in my opinion have perhaps been better served as a specific Legion choice. Probably for the Alpha Legion, Raven Guard, someone like that, to really bring out their character. To me personally, a sniper just doesn't read to me as what the early Space Marine Legions, with their crushing numbers and fearsome firepower, are all about. But you know what? You do you. I'm personally going to give the Vigilator a 1 for narrative, a 1 for hobby potential, and a 2 for gaming potential. Another sneaky one next, the Pathfinder. In the Heresy era, the use of the Scout Squad was in decline within the Legions, which were increasingly favouring the more heavily armoured Recon Squad. As such, Pathfinders are, well, there's something of a dying breed, experts in traversing hostile environments and stealth, but few in number. The Pathfinder gains the Scout, Infiltrate, Move through cover, and Pathfinder rules, and gains a movement bump by 1 inch. He must take Scout armour and can take an Astartes shotgun. This is probably, in my opinion, the weakest of the Consuls, and his use seems largely circumstantial, say perhaps an extremely dense urban or forest board, or perhaps you want to include him in your force for narrative reasons. I could see an interesting force potentially, say Space Wolves, Raven Guard, White Scars, someone like that, who makes use of this Consul to create a strong narrative around infiltration, speed, etc. But I honestly can't see the army being a tournament winner. There are some okay conversion options available as well. Therefore, I'm giving the Pathfinder a slightly underwhelming 2 for narrative, 1 for hobby, and a 0 for gaming potential, as I just can't see what you're supposed to do with it. I mean, views in the comments on that one, you know, school me on it. Now for a change of pace. The Legion Siegebreaker. The Siegebreaker is quite self-explanatory. This is the Consul the Legion brings in when it needs to crack open a fortified city or bastion of the enemy. They often command artillery, armour, or other heavy support units in the Legion and achieve the breakthrough so that other lighter assault units or mobile forces can exploit the breach. Now, the Siegebreaker can lend their Sunder ability to a nominated unit within 6 inches and is officially King of Phosphex, which is basically the 40k equivalent of White Phosphorus and Greek Fire, receiving 3 Phosphex bombs and the ability to upgrade rapier weapons platforms with Phosphex canisters. Now, the Siegebreaker is a really fun, interesting and narratively strong choice in my opinion, and I predict we're going to be seeing quite a few of these guys around on the battlefields of the 31st millennium. The Phosphox bomb seems like a particularly potent choice for Zone Mortalis games, I think. I can't wait to make one of these myself. I'm going to give the Siegebreaker a 2 for narrative, a 2 for hobby, and a 3 for gaming potential. Okay, so on the theme of heavy weapons, next the Legion Armistos. The Armistos is the gunny sergeant and quartermaster of the Legion and is responsible for testing, maintaining weaponry and equipment, making logistical arrangements, and reports ultimately to the Master of Arsenal within the Legion. Now, this is another unit that, personally, from a kind of narrative point of view, I'm really glad to see represented in Heresy. I feel it really rounds out the realism and plausibility of the Legions and makes them feel like they could more easily really exist. After all those bolters just aren't going to maintain themselves, are they? He can take a master-crafted version of just about every man-portable heavy weapon, comes stock with a Cognis Signum for a +1 ballistic skill shooting buff to his unit, and he has an augury scanner to ignore night fighting and improve the range of the interceptor reaction to jump on some reserve units coming in. So he's best paired ultimately with a heavy support unit to throw that firepower deep down range and intercept deep strikers, flankers, etc. One thing to note is that the Cognis Signum means that you have to forfeit the Armistos shooting that turn in order to use it. So actually you might not want to bother giving him that mastercrafted heavy weapon. That's up to you. There aren't, I think, a ton of cool conversion options I can think of off the top of my head. One idea I had was maybe you could have a little gaggle of assistants or huscarls polishing bolters and carrying around his stuff, but I haven't got a lot, I'm afraid. I'm going to give the Armistos a 2 for narrative, 1 for hobby, and a 1 for gaming potential. The next 3 are what I like to think of as different flavours of IT support. First up is the Forgelord. So the Forgelord basically is the most skilled and experienced of the Legion's tech marines. They're often put in command of units, of vehicles, and automata, which are basically robots with human brains in the Legion. Second is the Mortificator. He is a specialist tech marine who basically ministers to the Legion's dreadnoughts. Dreadnoughts being a sort of armoured life support machine where horrifically wounded marines are entombed so that they can continue to serve in a near death-like state. The Mortificator's role is to help rouse the dreadnoughts whose pilots are held in stasis when they're not in battle, and to detect those who've lost their sanity. Thirdly, there is the Praevian, a specialist tech marine who leads the Legion's bound automata into battle. Now, interestingly, as the heresy raged on and casualties mounted, the use of automata increased, and some of these machines were actually formally inducted into the Legion as honorary legionaries under the Praevian. Now, this is quite an interesting development, really, for a universe where thinking machines are outlawed, castigated, and, hunted by the Mechanicus. Albeit that automata do ultimately have human brains at the cause of their cogitators and do, follow instructions and protocols. It's slightly different. Another interesting angle is that Praevians are often made up of the injured officers who are too horribly wounded or too awkward for other senior positions. And the position's kind of used as a dumping ground within the Legion, really. This is quite an interesting narrative hook, and one I think could be quite nicely built into the story of your Space Marine Legion. Perhaps your Praevian is harbouring a grudge, never gets the credit or respect that he thinks he's due. Perhaps that's sowed the seeds of disloyalty or betrayal in his heart. It's up to you. All of these consoles offer quite interesting conversion opportunities. You can go crazy with mechadendrites, servo arms, whatever you want. They can also take in the list a cyber familiar, which is a really cool conversion opportunity. I mean, it's time to get up the robot monkeys, cyber ostriches, robo gorillas, whatever you want. In game, they're each open up or allow you to take additional specialist units suited to their particular role. It's pretty cool, so you can kind of build a narrative in your army. So you can get Phalanx cohorts for the Forgelord, more dreadnoughts in an army with a Mortificator, and you can get a Castellax battle automata maniple or a Vorox battle automata maniple for the Praevian. Now, the rules for those are not coming out. Well, they are coming out, but they're not out yet, and they'll be in the Liber Metallicum book, so I can't actually tell you what they do or if they're any good, but let's just assume for the minute that they're mid-table. The units I'm talking about can also repair units, except the Praevian, and the Mortificator makes dreads even harder to kill with a will not die roll of 5+, so it's going to be very nasty in a Dreadnought army. So in summary, I'm going to give the Forgelord a 1 for narrative, a 3 for hobby, and a 2 for game potential. The Mortificator a 2 for narrative, 3 for hobby, and a 3 for game potential, as dreads are really good right now. I'm going to give the Praevian a 3 for narrative, 3 for hobby, and a 2 for gaming potential. 2 to go. It's another subgrouping this time, the Psychers. So in 30k, Psychers are individuals who can manifest the power of the warp, which is basically an energy dimension, and pull that energy into real space. Now, using the power in this way is a really dangerous act and can lead to insanity, demonic possession, and if you're lucky, death. The Librarian is a battle psyker who basically uses their powers to support their brothers in combat. Now, the use of such psykers in the legions was actually outlawed at the Council of Nicaea by the Emperor in the latter part of the Great Crusade. This was part of his work to discourage humanity's contact with the warp. There's a much bigger story there that I won't go into right now. However, some legions did continue to use librarians, and some of those librarians turned their studies to the dark art of demonology, becoming esoterists. Now, an esoterists specialised in breaking the veil between the warp and real space, creating a bridge that allowed Horus's newfound demonic allies to pass into reality. Loyalist esoterists, meanwhile, sought to close such rifts. Now, both of these offer really strong narrative potential, with demons popping in and out of reality, psychic powers going off, and perils of the warp attacks consuming psychers cocky and loaded with power. In my opinion, this is exactly what the Heresyverse is all about, and I am here for it. Now, In game terms, the Librarian has access to a range of psychic powers, too numerous really to go into now. Suffice to say that they are a flexible choice capable of a range of useful buffs, debuffs and direct attacks. They can access a force weapon, which is a really nasty weapon that doubles their strength on a successful psychic test, and a psychic hood, which can cancel out your opponent's psychic powers. Meanwhile, the Esoterist can take both of those previous options, an Archaeotech pistol, which gives him some really nice dagger, and has a bespoke set of psychic powers called the Anathema Doctrine. The Anathema Doctrine provides a powerful ranged attack, which is especially effective against demons due to the Santic keyword, and the ability for the Traitor Legions to take 3 units from the Ruinstorm demon army, which, yep, you guessed it, isn't out yet. Both are good places to practice object source lighting, special effects, and FX, lightning, flames, you know, whatever you want really, and to go to town with some really cool conversions. Perhaps you could have a demon bursting out of one. There's lots of choices really. So I'm going to give the Librarian a 2 for narrative, 3 for hobby, and a 2 for game potential. Meanwhile, the Esoterist gets the same score, but a 3 for narrative, as you get the opportunity to bring demonic units to the table, and who doesn't love the story of a Librarian neck deep on a quest for knowledge turned to darkness. And there we have it, guys. Our league table is complete. It's of course worth saying that all of this is subjective, and I mean, that's okay. This is my list, your list could look different. But the real question is, what consuls do you want to have in your army? How will you convert them? What will their story be? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the ride. If you did, subscribe to the channel. I've got a slew of Heresy videos in development right now. And don't forget, sharing is caring, so like, share, comment, etc. to make the channel grow and get the video around. Thanks for listening, guys. See you soon. Hey guys, welcome to the Endscreen. Don't go anywhere. So if you're thinking, how do I actually apply this to my army, or I want to see some people and how they've done this, then you should really check out our Tale of 4 Gamers, available somewhere on the screen right now.